State's Exhibit 521 is a worksheet showing steps and time steps were taken, along with some calculations about how many steps per minute. It's come to my attention that there's a math error contained in the previously submitted exhibit. And I think the error bled over into the defense's exhibit. I think it's 156. And so at this time, with the state's consent, the state would like to just simply substitute a worksheet with the correct math for the previous incorrect worksheet.
The defense would also ask the jury to sign.
Okay. Yes. So you'll bring the jury.
Jury is present.
All right, thank you. Your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Dr. Kenny Kinsey.
Do you swear the testimony that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You'll have a seat to adjust that microphone for me. If you'll state your name, spell your last name for the record.
Kenneth Lee Kinsey, Kinsey.
Welcome back, Dr. Kinsey. It feels like a year since you were here. You were qualified last week as an expert, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
What I would like for you to do right now is just to remind the jury, give them a little bit of background on your education, your work history, your credentials that made you qualified to be an expert witness.
Yes, sir. I've got a degree from Clemson University, a master's degree, that's undergraduate, a master's degree from Troy University, a PhD from Walden University. I have formerly been certified by the International Association for Identification 2 different times for crime scene investigation and reconstruction. I've worked approximately 800 death scenes in my career, and I've handled and processed countless evidence in crime scene and the crime scene related disciplines. I have completed and passed proficiency in those disciplines as recommended by the International Association for Identification, which includes oral exams, research, technical work, and also I worked under a qualified examiner for a determined amount of time. And I've been a police officer for approximately 30 years in various capacities.
And just to remind the jury, you were qualified as a forensic or crime scene forensics expert in this particular case.
Yes, sir, I was.
And real quick, what other types of qualifications as an expert do you possess?
I'm also a firearms instructor for handguns, shotguns. They call them patrol rifles, but that includes subguns, fully automatic and semi-automatic platforms. I have endorsements through the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. I'm also a SLED concealed weapons permit instructor, and I'm formerly a law enforcement firearms instructor through the NRA.
Now, you've had an opportunity to review the case file for this particular case, correct?
Yes, I have.
And you have actually been out to the crime scene, correct?
I have.
Beg the court's indulgence. I would like to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 526. Do you recognize this map?
Yes, sir, I do.
And what is it?
That's a satellite map from the Moselle property.
I would like to offer this into evidence. I assume no objection.
Submit it.
Dr. Kinsey, we're going to keep our testimony today narrowly focused and tailored to a few witnesses that the defense put up this past week. Did you have the opportunity to observe one witness named Michael Sutton, who was a forensic mechanical engineer for the defense?
I did.
Now, do you recall any of his conclusions or what his main conclusion was regarding the size of the shooter?
I do.
What was that conclusion?
5'2" to 5'4".
I would like now, Doug, if you would, I would like for you to publish or cut on Defense Exhibit 140. Go to page 49. Okay, now what I want to do is we're going to get into this in just a moment, but they published this into evidence last week. And do you recognize these green lines coming out?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, and what do those green lines represent?
Those green lines represent a predicted static angle or I don't know what you would call it, trajectory for possible shooters.
And Doug, if you would go to page 74 of this presentation, please. Do you recognize this photo on page 74 of the defense exhibit?
I do.
And what is it?
It is Mr. Sutton pointing a pump action shotgun into the feed room at Moselle.
Okay, and did Mr. Sutton develop his conclusions as to the height of the shooter based on math that he did in this particular case?
He said it was trigonometry, but yes, sir, he did.
We're ready. So you tell us, you recognize this photo?
Yes, sir.
And this is the door?
Yes, sir.
And this part of the door is is blood spattered,
Yes, sir, it is.
and then there's hair.
There's hair, there's a little bit of bone, and there's some other body tissue.
Okay, and there, you think, where is Paul in relation to the door at this
He
point?
would be right where I showed you, off at 135-ish, give or take a few degrees, closer to this side, so you could make that angle. You can look at the directionality in the blood and tell which direction it's going.
Okay. And coming out of the top of his head would be 75 steel pellets?
Yes, sir. That's no other way for him to get out. Yes, sir.
And you went out there and you found one indentation.
Well, it's an indentation, but that is a little deceptive because you can see the paint damage to the top of the door. One indent is what I found, but I said bullet defects. The S got dropped from that. But if you zoom in on that, you can see where the paint was just disturbed around that indentation. But one proves it didn't go back the other direction, Mr. Griffin. It doesn't take a lot.
So if you'll pull up 188, defendants and evidence 188, and this is not under seal. 188, please. And zoom in on the indentation.
There's actually several if you,
All right.
you're cutting in on that one, but
So you say there are more defects on the door?
yes, sir.
Did you document any defects that you observed on the door?
I got them in a photograph. I can show you.
Okay.
What other documentation did I need to do it to verify that that's the same door?
No, I'm just talking about other pellet marks on the
There
door.
are other pellet marks on there. Yes, sir. You just cut that one down, but if you move up a little bit, you can see the little indentions right there in the paint,
All right, back it up, Doug.
right above the hinge, right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay.
There's several of them there.
And then you see this pellet here in the,
I did not see that, but I'm vertically challenged, and I wish I could have looked up and saw that pellet, but I did not see that pellet lodged in that door frame. But I'm glad Mr. Pombach, however you say his name, I'm glad he found it because that even proves my point a little bit more.
well, so I'm gonna ask you,
Mhm.
according to your shot angle, how would a pellet get there?
It's really, the cone, it's a cone, Mr. Griffin. I've already described how shot pattern works. It's a cone.
So this missed his head, you think?
No, it come out of his head.
you-
And the ones in the floor in the feed room probably also come out of his head. They bounced off that door, the OSB, and in the feed room.
Okay. And so you believe that this pellet that's in the door jamb came through his shoulder, through his neck, out the top of his head, and ended up at that location.
Well, it didn't turn around and come back out the top of his head. Yes, sir, I do believe that.
Well, now you said there's blowback 8 to 10%. What do you mean? You testified earlier there's blowback about 8.
If someone is behind the stock of a long gun and you shoot someone within distance to have high velocity spatter come back at you, it's going to be 8 to 10% of what's in front of the gun is going to come back at you. And a lot of the literature supports that.
Well, were you, let me show you, and this is under seal. Please cover up, and it's Defendant's Exhibit 192. Under seal, 192. You see that?
What?
This photo.
Yes, sir.
Now, this blood spatter down here where you say Paul would be standing, what's your explanation for that?
What do you mean, what's my explanation?
What is it?
That is medium directional blood spatter.
From what injury to Paul?
Probably his brain hitting the sidewalk would be my best guess, but that's not high velocity.
Now, you understand what Mr. Palmback said was that that's more consistent with Paul being shot from the top of the head, going through his neck, out his shoulder, and producing that stain.
I also understand Mr. Palmback said there's no damage over here from those shot pellets, and you can't have one without the other. I disagree with that result.
So you believe this is from Paul's brain landing?
Either his
Where?
brain landing on the sidewalk, bouncing off the door, or either his body falling in body fluids outside. That's low velocity, low to medium velocity. That's not high velocity blood spatter. That's stomping in a puddle of blood or something moving in a puddle of blood. That's not the projected blood like you'd have a millimeter or less in high velocity blood spatter. That's large. It does show some directionality. It's coming from the door frame or either right outside the door frame, but it's large. That's way too large to be associated with the exit hole of a gunshot.
So you understand his brain landed feet outside.
I do understand, Mr. Griffin, but I also know his brain made contact with that door and the top of that door frame before it landed. And I know gravity works and brings body fluids back down to earth. You got one or the other, either that or when he fell in existing blood. That is low velocity. Like I said, that's associated with something in a puddle or something large. That's not associated with a gunshot or high-speed machinery.
Now, would you agree this is a voiding area over here on the door?
I wouldn't agree it's a void area because I don't see the outline of shoes, or I don't see the outline of a implement or the outline of anything else. I would say there's more concentrated blood droplets over here on the side opposite the hinge, but I would not necessarily agree that's a void area. I see downward spatter on the door right here. For it to be a void, that would have to be absent blood.
Well, you see a little bit,
I do, yes, sir.
but you don't see very much blood on the door.
Not
do you?
compared to the other side. You're correct.
Okay. Now,
But if there's something there, Mr. Griffin, blocking that spot, you're not going to see a little bit. You're going to see none. If you're standing there and I splash you with blood, there's going to be two perfect bloodless footprints there. So that's why I'm not considering this a void.
unless it goes up and comes down.
Gravity brings it down. That is right. And if your person had time to move or whatever, I guess that could count for it. But
Well,
I
if
don't
it went
consider-
over the person and came down.
and that would do what?
If body matter went over, brain went over, hit the top of the door, and then bounced out, and blood came down, that would account for a drop here or there, would it not?
It could count for a drop here or there, but like I told you, the majority of that force is applied upward.
Right.
Upward. That's why you got the hair on the ceiling. That's why you've got the demarcation line on the containers. That body fluid was directed upward with force.
Okay. And the, you mentioned there's no footprints here. Was any effort made to illuminate footwear impressions through any protein enhancers?
I didn't see any of that, Mr. Griffin, if they did. I saw no evidence of that when I went back to the scene. Generally, when you use dye stains and that kind of thing, it's just going to be there forever.
Dye stain would have picked up perhaps stained footwear impressions you can't see with the naked eye, wouldn't they?
It may have if someone had stepped in blood and left a footwear impression.
Right. Well, there's a shooter somewhere inside or outside the door, correct?
Yes, sir, I agree with that.
And there's no effort to determine footwear impressions of the shooter.
Mr. Griffin, obviously,
was there?
I don't know. I don't know what the process was. I know they examined some partial footwear impressions,
You can take this down, Doug.
but I don't know how far they went beyond that.
Well, they certainly should have gone further than they did. Would you agree with that?
Mr. Griffin, I can only judge what I would do, and sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. If I saw evidence that I had something that I needed some more detail, I would use chemicals, but it just depends on the situation.
Kenzie, I'm gonna show you what we marked as defendants exhibit 197 and 196. And I'll ask you first, 197, do you recognize that as essentially a picture outside the feed room door?
Yes, sir, I do.
And Your Honor would move 197 into evidence this time without objection, I believe.
Are you offering both of them?
Yes, sir.
Any objection to either?
No objection, Your
They're
Honor.
both admitted.
All right, 196. Dr. Kinsey, what would you make of those pot marks on the concrete outside the feed room door?
I don't know, Mr. Griffin. I don't know what they are.
Could they be pellet?
I guess they could be.
All right.
They could be from a pressure washer also.
You have these? Okay, great. So we're seeing for the jury 197, and then, can you zoom in there? Doug, go to 196, please. So those could be from a pressure washer, and those could be from a number 2 birdshot pellets, correct?
Well, I don't know. I have to see the cement everywhere else to see how it's weathered.
All right, fair enough. Now, last few questions, you mentioned that that you had seen some 12 execution style killings with contact wounds to the head.
I said I've worked about 3 dozen total, probably 12 of them were homicides to the head. The execution thing, I don't know if it's execution or just contact, but I would say it's self-inflicted as opposed to someone else doing it.
Well, so let's get it right. 36 total. I thought
Probably 3 dozen total, yes, sir. And 2/3 of that was probably self-inflicted, so that would leave 12.
Self-inflicted are usually under the chin and the mouth on the side.
Well, the one that I witnessed was to the forehead.
To the forehead.
Yes, sir.
Now, of the 36, how many were shotguns?
No, I've worked a lot of self-inflicted gunshot deaths. I was saying shotguns.
Oh,
about 3
so
dozen.
36 shotguns.
Yes, sir.
Roughly 12.
And a couple of them were accidents too, but yes, sir.
Okay. And the and how many involved number 2 birdshot?
I don't recall. I had some with birdshot. I don't recall if it was number 2, 4, 8, 9. I don't know.
And how many were to the back of the head?
A dozen, probably a dozen were to the head, contact either the back or the sides, or the one I told you about in the front.
Okay. And any of those, did the brain evacuate from the skull cavity?
I have seen them. I have seen the brains come out. Usually that was from one here. I'm not going to say I haven't seen it. I probably have seen it. But most definitely, like I said earlier, when I described it, it looks like it goes away. It's really still there. It's just not something you can quantify. I mean, it's just a mess. That's the only way I can explain it.
In your career, have you ever worked a case where a victim's brain had been evacuated the way Paul's was in this case?
Yes, sir, I have. And tongues also. Tongue and brain. I have seen them. Yes, sir.
And were those self-inflicted?
Both.
Okay.
Yes, sir, both.
And you're talking about shotgun?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Shotguns.
And I think you described those as execution style killings.
Yes, sir. I would, if you put it on somebody's head from the side or the top, that's how I would describe it.
Well, let me ask you, would you describe Paul's murder here as an execution style killing?
In the context that someone executed him, yes, sir, but it wasn't in the top of the head.
I understand.
Yes, sir.
And that, and there was no signs of struggle? You agree with that?
I saw none. No, sir.
And would you agree with Mr. Palmbach that it appeared that Paul got caught by surprise?
I've said that from the start. That would account for his arms being down. Yes, sir.
And
Or someone he was real comfortable with.
And even under your analysis, the shooter would have blood, blowback blood on them. Is that correct?
I believe they would. Yes, sir.
It's just a matter of the quantity between you and Mr. Palmbach as to how much blood would.
Well, as I mentioned in my report, as you get closer to the muzzle of the gun, I think proportionally it's going to increase. You know, when I said 8 to 10% is what most of the literature says, that's behind the stock. But as you get proportionately closer to the muzzle end of the gun, that's going to increase because you're down at the business end where those pellets are coming out doing damage.
And in this case, you're talking about brain matter,
Yes, sir.
blood,
Bone. Yes, sir.
and getting hit from some skull fragments
Yes, sir. That's possible.
under your scenario as well.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And lastly, how many murder have you worked where one person brings a high-powered assault weapon that has a magazine capacity of 20 or more rounds and a shotgun with maximum capacity, maybe 3 shells?
Well, I have worked multiple murders where the available weapons there were used and several calibers were used, but I can't tell you from memory the other ones.
Logically, it would make sense that if you're going to go kill 2 people and you have a high-powered weapon with a high capacity magazine, that was all you need to do the job, right?
Well, if the weapon's available, Mr. Griffin, if it's there and it's available and maybe it wasn't something that I put a lot of thought in, I'm probably going to use whatever's available.
Well, here we know there were 2 weapons available. There was a 12-gauge shotgun and a AR-15 style 300 blackout,
Yes, sir.
and both were used.
Yes, sir.
And there was sufficient capacity in the 300 blackout to kill both Maggie and Paul, correct?
Well, in a perfect scenario, a shotgun is what I would want at night with moving targets. But in a perfect scenario, a young man doesn't take a double-aught buckshot to the middle of the chest and walk away from it. So I don't know. I don't think like that. I don't know. But in the dark, I'd rather have a shotgun than that rifle.
Take course and build it for just a second. One more line of questioning. You demonstrated Mr. Palmbach's shot from the top of the head with Attorney General Wilson a moment ago.
Yes, sir.
Now, that was Mr. Palmbach never put anybody inside the door the way y'all demonstrated in his testimony, did he?
That is the way I understood it. Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, he said that, well, can you come up here, Mr.
I mean,
Harpoon?
with the void, you're talking about the void. He said there's a void here, and this is where I believe the shooter would be, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So if you'll come up here, Mr. Harpoon, and let me find the dowel.
Let me bend down. Don't let him bend down like that.
No. So if you're coming out of the threat, so you're going to get down.
Down?
Yeah, get down there. Almost to the ground.
And over like this.
Further. Oh, no. Yeah, you probably need to get down further, but you probably can't do that. But the shot to the head as he's coming out, right? Or boom.
He'd have to be twisted this way for it to work out with the arm if that was the
Okay.
exit. Yes, sir.
But that's fine. That's fine. But Mr. Palmbach never said that they passed in the doorway. did he?
He might not have said those words, but that was my inference that there's a void there. And when he's in the picture holding his hands here, I
Right.
took that to be Paul's head. So that's,
All right, well, okay, did you not understand when he was in the picture there? He was demonstrating what your angle had to be to make it work?
well, I wasn't in the door with my angle.
I understand. I
Yeah.
understand. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's all we have.
Thank you.
All right.
Briefly, Your Honor. All right, Dr. Kinsey, you've had an opportunity to speak with with Dr. Reimer, the pathologist that actually examined Maggie and Paul, correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
And you had an opportunity to observe and listen to the testimony of Dr. I think it's Eisenstadt, who was the pathologist that did not examine Maggie and Paul, correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
You've also had an opportunity to go to the crime scene and observe the feed room, observe the areas where both Maggie and Paul were murdered, correct?
That is correct.
You've had an opportunity to observe all the brain matter and tissue and the defects in the doors and the wood and everything and get a complete context for what happened that night, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Is Dr. Reimer or Dr. Eisenstadt's conclusions about the trauma to the bodies, which one of them is more consistent with what happened at the crime scene as you observed with your expert background?
Well, I'll start by saying I don't know either one of them from a can of paint. This was my first time ever meeting Dr. Reimer, but my opinions are consistent with hers. I vary a little bit on the distance, but like I said, I'm not going to argue with a pathologist. I'm not that kind of doctor.
Real quick, you differ with her a little bit on the distance of what?
Of the fatal shot to Paul's shoulder, I believe it was a little bit closer, and I can't account for that lack of stippling. But other than that, her opinions and my opinions are fairly consistent.
But that would not change, that difference of opinion would not change your conclusions either way.
No, sir, they would not.
For the sake of this redirect, let's assume for a moment that the angle of impact and the direction that the defense posed were accurate. Are there other variables that the defense expert didn't account for that could change the height of the shooter?
Well, as I demonstrated, positioning, distance, height, the way you're holding the weapon that could place those cartridge cases there. It's nothing uniform about it. As I said, it's static and dynamic.
So the shooter is running around and the victim is moving, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's chaotic.
Yes, sir.
It's crazy.
Yes, sir. I would imagine it was.
There's no way to know, unless you were there, how the gun was being shouldered, where it was being held, the angle. There's no way to know that.
I have no way of knowing that.
You were asked about how much you were being paid to be here today. Do you recall what the hourly rates of the defense experts were when they testified?
I do.
Can you go ahead and tell me what those were?
Some was $350 an hour, some was $650 an hour, and I think one was $5,500 a day, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh. Jim, pictures you just put into evidence. Oh. I got them right here. I just found them. Thank you. Okay, I'm showing you what's marked as State's Exhibit 197. Do you know when that picture was taken?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Sir.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 196. Do you know when that picture was taken?
I have no idea. No, sir.
Is there anything about the defects of that photo that stand out to you other than just concrete defects?
They're not very uniform, but no, sir. Other than that,
Does that photo tell you anything?
it tells me nothing. No, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Anything further? Thank you. You may step down. Any further witnesses by the state?
Your Honor, in the rebuttal case, the state rests.
Ladies and gentlemen, the state has rested. Going to have you go to the jury room for a break. Please do not discuss the case. Everyone be seated. Any comments you want to make, Mr. Harpootlian or Mr. Griffin, about Sir rebuttal?
Sorry.
About Sir rebuttal, Sir reply.
No, thank you.
No. So we run out of time today as far as the jury view. We're going to take a recess for me to confer with counsel.